Welcome to the Observe Day podcast, the show where we celebrate the days that matter. From holidays to meaningful observances, we bring you inspiring conversations, stories, and ideas to make each day count. Whether it's raising awareness, learning something new, or simply sparking joy, this is your space to explore the calendar in a whole new way. I'm your host, Wisdom Okonkwo, and I'm excited to share today's observance with you. Let's dive in. Welcome to Observe Day, where we honor the moments that shape our lives. In celebration of National Recovery Month, I'm joined by Dr. Jeffrey Reynolds, an Ironman triathlete, author, nonprofit executive, and two-time cancer survivor. Jeff's story, captured in his book Every Mile Matters, turning triathlon training into cancer triumph, is about more than survivor. It's about resilience, recovery, and living fully in the face of life's toughest races. Today, we'll explore how recovery is not just about getting back what was lost, but about discovering new strength, deeper purpose, and unexpected joy. Welcome to the podcast, Jeff. Dr. Jeff.
Great. Thanks so much for having me on. It's a
Yeah.
pleasure.
Yeah, you described yourself as both an Ironman triathlete and a two-time cancer survivor. How do those two identities intersect when it comes to recovery?
Well, look, here in the United States, we mark National Recovery Month with an emphasis on people who have struggled with addiction or something else. The emphasis on addiction here is pretty strong, and we live in a world that's consumed by outside things, whether it's drugs or alcohol or social media, you name it. And so, during this National Recovery Month, it really is a celebration of people reclaiming their identity, reclaiming who they are, really getting to the core of and the essence of who you are as a person. Ironman and both cancer and Ironman did that for me. I took up triathlons and specifically Ironman because doing an Ironman race, training for it, completing it, really teaches you a lot about who you are. Your fortitude, your willingness to keep going. There are times during, just to put it in context, an Ironman triathlon consists of a 2.4 mile swim, a 112-mile bike ride, and then running a full 26.2 mile marathon. And you need to do that all in under 17 hours. Otherwise, you're disqualified. And so I've done that in just over 15 hours. And there are some dark moments in all of that. There's dark moments on the swim where you're thrown into what feels like a washing machine with a whole bunch of other people, and you're all flailing about trying to get to the end. There are times like that during the ride when you just pedal forever, and you combat hills and wind, and somehow you keep going. And by the time you make it to the run, not only are you exhausted emotionally, but you're exhausted physically. And there are some very, very dark moments during that run. And then you get to the finish line, and then you realize that it was all worth it. And I think, triathlon is a really good metaphor for so many aspects of life, including your willingness to get more comfortable with that uncomfortability, to sit in it, to navigate it, and to make it through. And so, soon after completing Ironman Florida here in the States, I was diagnosed the first time with cancer. It was a diagnosis that came out of the blue. I had no idea that this was kind of festering inside me. But when I got the diagnosis, apart from being shocked, I also kind of thought back and said, you know what? I did an Ironman race, and evidently I didn't even know it, but evidently I had cancer when I did that. And somehow I managed to get through that race. And,
Yeah.
I got through that first incident of cancer and then went on to the second. So, those are both really, really good metaphors for the ability to reclaim who you are.
Yeah. One of the key things I notice you say is that every swim, bike ride, and run prepared you for the quote unquote race of your life. Can you share one specific moment during treatment when your athlete's mindset became your survivor too?
Yeah, I can. That actually comes pretty easily. Um, during my second cancer diagnosis, which was stage 3 B colorectal cancer, which is a pretty serious diagnosis. Stage 4 means that cancer has spread to other parts of your body. And as you go up in stages from 1 to 4, your likelihood of survival and the rate of survival for people impacted drops precipitously. And so I was precariously close to stage 4. Stage 3B is pretty serious. And so I was put on a pretty extensive regimen that included 27 consecutive days of chemotherapy, 27 consecutive days of radiation in a radiation machine, a short break, and then 6 months worth of chemotherapy infusions with 3 forms of chemo. My doctor said, look, we're going to do 8 of those infusions over the course
Wow.
of 6 months. They're pretty significant infusions. You're going to feel some side effects. And, if we get to that, midpoint and it looks like your health has taken a dive where you can't manage the side effects, then we're going to cut it short. And so we were at, maybe treatment 6 or 7. And he said, look, your blood counts are dropping. I don't want you to wind up in the hospital. The side effects are getting more serious and they might not go away. We should talk about how we want to proceed here. And he said, I'm tempted to cut this short. He said to me, but I know you'll never go for that. And that was the truth. So for me, being at kind of the tail end of that treatment and stopping early would be like, stopping at mile 20 of a 26.2 mile marathon. You don't quit until you're done. You don't quit until the job is finished. And so it wasn't easy, but the same way during a marathon when my legs were telling me at mile 20, you got to stop, you got to stop, you got to stop. My mind told me, no, you have to keep going. The pain is temporary, failure is forever. And so for me, it gave me the internal strength and fortitude to continue on with treatment. And ultimately, I had a really good treatment outcome. I probably would have had that same outcome had I cut it short, but I wasn't willing to stop and take that chance. I felt like, if we're doing this treatment and I want the best possibility of survival, then I need to continue through to the end and finish what we started.
Yeah. You need to see it to the end. Wow. Your wife, Jillian, was by your side at every treatment.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to caregivers who are walking through recovery with their loved ones?
I think what I would say is take everything personally and nothing personally.
What does that
You
mean?
know, and so as much as I had support around me and lots and lots of love and support, probably, 10 times as much as the average person. There's still times when you kind of feel alone in all this. You're like, oh, geez, I'm the one with cancer. And you really have to face a lot of things. And if you're younger, I'm a little bit younger. I never expected this diagnosis. And so you go through things, just I think an emotional process of confronting the diagnosis, settling into the diagnosis, going back into some turmoil as you begin to wrestle with, what do I want my legacy to be? Treatment is tough, that kind of thing. It's really a whirlwind. And so, there's a lot to navigate. And so when I say take everything personal, what I mean by that is, it's an opportunity to grow closer to the people around you, the people you love, the people who care about you. Look, cancer is personal. I hate the disease, but I love the people around me, and cancer gave them the opportunity to rally around me and gave me the opportunity to accept that love and affection and caring in a way that maybe I hadn't before. When I say take nothing personally, for the person living with the diagnosis is uniquely positioned in the middle of all of the chaos. And so your loved ones are, for better or worse, kind of around the periphery, but you're in the center of all of that. And
Yeah.
you're in your own mind. And so, it's you're the one wrestling with the possibility that you may not make it through. You're the one.
Before we dive deeper, I'd love to invite you to join the Observe Day newsletter. Every week, I send you highlights of upcoming observances, creative ways to celebrate, and behind the scenes extras from the shows. It's the perfect way to stay inspired and never miss a meaningful moment. Sign up today at observeday.com/join. That is observeday.com/join. Now, let's get back to the conversation.
Wrestling with all the side effects. You're the one wrestling with, kind of thoughts about, if I don't make it through, have I accomplished all the things I want to accomplish? You're the one wrestling with the notion that, geez, I'm going to miss all these people who are rallying around me if the outcome isn't what I would hope it would be. So it's you're in a unique position. It's a very dynamic place, and so I'll tell you that kind of your mindset can change from one moment to another, the same way it does in triathlon racing or marathon racing. One minute you're feeling great and you say, I could do this all day. 5 minutes later, you're like, my legs feel like they're in concrete and I don't know that I could go another step. And that
Yeah,
passes just as quickly too. And so it's a really fluid space for a lot of.
yeah. Uh, Community is very important, very, very important. One of the things I noticed is that cancer forced you to finally write your book. How has facing mortality changed what you prioritize in life and work?
So, I've had the opportunity for 35 years to work with folks. I run a large not for profit organization here on Long Island in New York. And over the course of 35 years, I've worked with many, many, many folks who, quite frankly, are facing their deepest, darkest moments. Parents who are losing children to drug overdoses, people who are struggling with alcoholism or substance use or mental health issues, anxiety, depression, those kinds of things, as well as people that are dealing with other chronic illnesses. And typically, I'm the guy that provides the help, and that gives you a certain kind of power and feeling that you got things under control. And then all of a sudden, the script is flipped and you're the one relying on doctors and the healthcare system and asking people for advice and that kind of thing. And so it does kind of change up your relationship with other people and with yourself. The first time I had cancer, I didn't necessarily think I could die from it. The second time I did and kind of realized and said, all right, so this is two cancers in 2 years. What's happening here? Even if I make it through this second one, there's an old adage that three strikes and you're out. And so that weighed pretty
Yeah,
heavily on me. I think any kind of diagnosis kind of puts you more in touch with, who you are and forces you to wrestle with those questions about, whether or not you've accomplished everything you wanted to accomplish. Quite frankly, I always thought my book would be about my journey helping other people. I didn't realize that it would be about myself.
yeah,
So that was a surprise. And, you begin thinking about your life when you do this and you begin taking that inventory the same way people in recovery from an addiction do. And I just looked at it and said, look, there's some messages here and some lessons here that I would love to share with a wider audience, whether that's, the millions of people who are struggling with cancer or their caregivers, people dealing with another serious illness, maybe even addiction. And then, people who just want to get better at life. I think there are people for whom it doesn't take a significant medical diagnosis to want to change and improve your life and become an even better person. Sometimes it takes those diagnoses to get us to do some of that. But my hope in writing the book was that, whether I live for another 10 years or 50 years, that I would leave something behind that would be of value and memorialize some of what I've experienced.
yeah. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Jeff. If someone listening is facing their own race they never signed up for, what's the one mindset shift you'd encourage them to make today?
Yeah, look, so there's a couple things, but first and foremost, I would say keep going. Um, the reality is that as we all kind of walk this journey called life, there are going to be downhill slopes where the walking is easy, and then there's going to be uphill climbs where things feel a little bit tougher. There are going to be twists and turns. That are going to be things that appear in the road to block your way. Keep going. And so that would be my top message. The second message I would give, and I wrote in the book that nobody does an Ironman triathlon alone. Your family makes sacrifices while you're out training. You use a coach. You're racing alongside other people. There are volunteers who set up the race course that morning. You don't do it alone, and nobody battles cancer alone. Hopefully you have a really good doctor, you have an oncology team, you have nurses that help you through chemo and that kind of thing. But you also shouldn't try to do life alone. And so the second thing I would say is, make sure that you've got a solid support team around you. And that might be your close friends, it might be acquaintances who turn into friends, it might be your coworkers. think about really who are the 5 people closest to you, and how can you lean on each other to make the journey a little bit easier. And so I think those are two of the key takeaways that I would give to listeners. The third thing, if I had to name a third, it would be pace yourself. There's an old saying that life is a marathon, it's not a sprint. Hopefully it's a long journey, and you want to make sure that you pace yourself with the energy and the introspection that you need in order to be successful. I think too many of us just kind of go through life checking off the calendar. I mean, here in the States, we're already into fall, and people are like, "Well, where did the summer go?" Well,
Yeah.
the summer went, and very often our time passes very quickly, and our ability to slow down and enjoy the day, the ability to slow down and connect with other people. Sometimes it takes a serious illness to remind ourselves that our time here is limited, but our time here is also precious and can be incredibly fulfilling. And if you go just day after day in the grind and you don't take a moment to appreciate everything that's around us, you wind up going through seasons and saying, wow, that went so fast. And before you know it, that time has run out. I envision like a tiny countdown clock. It's invisible, but I think about it above our desks at work, above our beds when we go to sleep at night, and that countdown clock is running. And on average, we all have maybe 80 summers to enjoy. And so when you go through an entire summer and say, "Wow, that went so fast. Where did it go?" You only have so many of those. So slow down, take the time, and really try to enjoy it.
Oh, oh, thank you so much. I did prepare a couple of about 4 questions for a lightning round. So they're quick questions with that
Yeah,
demand quick answers. You ready?
I'm ready.
What's a word that defines recovery for you?
Perseverance.
Okay. What's the toughest mile of your cancer journey?
The toughest what?
The toughest mile.
Mind.
Mile.
Um,
Yeah. Your book is Every Mile Matters. That what's
Yes.
the
Oh, so the toughest mile. I'm sorry. The toughest mile. Honestly, the toughest mile was finishing treatment and realizing that cancer isn't over. It will forever be an important part of my life, for better or worse.
yeah. Wow. What's a ritual or practice that helped you heal?
Doing things like this, talking to people like you who kind of appreciate the journey, talking with, my friends, my loved ones, and being able to educate people out there in our larger community about not only cancer, but about life.
What's one thing you now celebrate that you used to overlook?
Every day, right? Every day, every moment. In drug and alcohol recovery circles, we talk about one day at a time, and if need be, 1 minute at a time. And I've come to appreciate the value of the day, the value of the minute, the value of, even if it's a fleeting moment, just being fully immersed in that second, and appreciating it with others.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Dr. Jeff. Briefly, can you tell us about the book and where we can get the book?
Sure. The book is called Every Mile Matters, Turning Triathlon Training into Cancer Triumph. Again, Every Mile Matters. You can get it on Amazon. You can get it at Barnes and Noble. We also have a website set up for the book. It's everymilematters.com, everymilematters.com. Would love for you to check it out. And if you read it and take something positive away from it, or think there's something I could have done better, I love reader feedback. So let me know how you received it.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Dr. Jeff. It's been an absolute delight to just listen to your story and to remind. It is a reminder for those of us out there that have not faced instance of mortality. It's the crazy thing about facing instance of mortality that not every time you survive to tell the story. So we don't have to
That's
face, face instance of mortality before we start living our life.
that's exactly right. Wisdom, thank you so much for having me on Observe Day. It's honestly a pleasure. I'm so glad you and I got to connect across many, many miles, and hopefully we reach some people. Thanks again for having me on.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. I'll put all the links mentioned in the description and the show notes so listeners can click and go directly to the website. Jeff's story and practical recovery insights in his book, Every Mind Matters, at everymindmatters.com. It's more than a memoir, it's a roadmap for anyone navigating life's toughest challenges. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me on.
That's it for today's episode of the Observe Day podcast. Thank you for spending your time with us as we explore today's observance. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts and share it with a friend who'd love to celebrate life's special days too. Don't forget to join the newsletter at observeday.co. observance.com/join for more observance stories, tips, and updates. Until next time, keep finding meaning in every day.